Hello, everyone. My name is Eric D'Souza, and welcome back to our continuing series where we celebrate the shortlist nominees of the Crime Writers of Canada Awards of 2022. Joining me today is Sam Wiebe, whose novel Hell and Gone has been nominated for the Howard Engel Award for Best Crime Novel in Canada. Welcome, Sam, and thank you for doing this interview. I know you're always very busy.
Thanks so much for having me, Eric. Never too busy to talk to the CWC.
Thank you. Um, I'm a big fan of your work, and Hell and Gone is perhaps the darkest novel that you've written to date. Can you tell us a bit about it?
I mean, that's arguable. They're all pretty dark, even the kids one. But basically, Hell and Gone starts with a moment of public violence. So my detective, Dave Wakeland, observes a bank robbery, which spills out into the street. He sees the robbers fire off their guns and shoot people and then drive off. And in the aftermath, he basically leaps out the office window and helps render assistance, first aid to one of the wounded people, becoming kind of a hero. But unfortunately for him, he doesn't stop there. He goes on to go into the building where this started, and what he sees in there is so traumatizing that when the police show up, he basically just shuts down and says, I didn't see anything. So Hell and Gone is basically the aftermath of that, and him being pulled into this case where he has to find the robbers, find what happened, and who hired them and who set this in motion.
Um, as I mentioned, I'm a huge fan. I read your book as soon as it comes out. And I have to admit, I was screaming to the pages, Dave, why are you going in that building? What compels him? Like, it's one thing to help the people outside, but what compels him? Is he like a true hero that he just has to help people, even if he's not even sure they need his help, he has to do it?
I think it's less that Dave Wakeland is a true hero, that he's just that kind of person that needs to know. And
Mm.
there's something there's something in that of all private detectives, in that, you know, when the weird person comes into your office and says, I've got this crazy job to do, part of the reader is saying, you know, why would you ever do that? This is a risk. You don't know this person. The other part's like, yeah, like what's going on here? So I think part of it is a genuine desire to help. I mean, he's just helped basically save this person's life, and there's maybe a little bit of an inflated sense of confidence there, but it's also that need to know, like, what is this? And so much of the story is him trying to suppress that, that desire to find out what's really going on. And well, I won't spoil what happens, but
No.
yeah, it's a constant battle. Let's say that.
One thing that differentiates Helen Gone from a lot of the other detective stories is sort of his emotional toll. Typically, the good guy shoots the femme fatale, has a drink, ready for work the next day, no big deal. Or Dave definitely suffers from what he's seeing. Um, was that conscious? Did you want to show this as an aspect of your hero? Like, it's going to change him, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is just the kind of media that I consume, and the stories that I like are often about a real test of the character. You know, there are people who love the Jack Reacher, Steven Seagal school of walks into a bar and like beats up 12 people and goes and has breakfast and beats up another 12 people, and it doesn't really have consequences. Um, you know, I grew up with westerns and detective stories where the the main character takes a beating. Like Clint Eastwood takes a huge beating in all of the like the Fistful of Dollars, like all those old spaghetti westerns. And Philip Marlowe is always getting knocked over the head. And it's not that I think that those kinds of things are interesting in and of themselves, but having to come from underneath as an underdog, I think is really, that's compelling to me. You know, I don't like writing about the guy who's always going to win. I like stories where there's a real chance that Wakeland will lose. There's also a chance that he'll win, but the cost will be so high that it's worse than losing. So I just like that. And yeah, I do think that this is cumulative. So as the series progresses, you know, it takes a toll. And that's something that the fourth book, if I get lucky enough to write one, will finally deal with, where he's sort of, you know, the city and what's going on there has finally taken its toll to the point where there's a major decision to be made.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't think it's diagnosed, but it seems like he might be suffering from PTSD at this point. Do you think he's ever going to have to go visit a shrink, take some time off, go on vacation in Mexico? Hopefully nobody dies.
Well, there is a brief scene in Hell and Gone where he goes to see a counselor, but because he's sort of wrapped up in the obsessive has to know thing, he just kind of like suborns that whole process into helping him solve his case. I think that PTSD is a really touchy subject to deal with. And I know trauma, I'm familiar with trauma, and I don't feel like I need to shy away from writing those kinds of things, but I really didn't want to put a diagnosis on it when I was writing this book. In the next one, that might be the case. I might, you know, have him talk to a counselor. I also just think that, you know, like The Sopranos did that sort of tough guy shrink stuff so well. It's hard to incorporate that in the story in a way that would be exciting to me. I don't think people really care so much about, you know, the detectives like childhood and stuff. People might disagree about that, but to me, a detective story is about what's going to happen next. It's not so much like, oh, when I was 12, I, you know, walked into the bedroom and saw my parents, whatever, you know, like.
Well, as a fan, as all the fans you have in BC and Canada, we do write that next novel, and we are very much, you know, wishing you the best of luck for May 26th. I think you're actually in this category. You were last year too. That worked out. So good luck to you. Again, thank you very much for doing the interview today, and I won't keep you any longer. I'll let you get back to writing.
Thanks so much, Eric. Before I leave, I would just like to say that if you haven't read any of the novels of Howard Engel, you know, everyone out there should. The Suicide Murders is great. And talk about a guy who deals with mental health issues in a really interesting way. That series is totally unique and very Canadian and very universal, I think, in a lot of ways. So I would highly recommend that. And it's an honor to be nominated. And thank you so much for having me.